Hey there, and welcome back to Utility Sports. If you do enjoy NFL mock drafts, this is the place to subscribe. Also, if you do like what you see on this video, hit that like button. We are shooting for 250 likes on this video.
Awesome. And now jumping in to the mock draft here, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars at pick one. Obviously, this has been set in stone, probably the direction that they're going to go, even with Urban Meyer and his Ohio State ties. Austin, where are the Jaguars going at pick one?
At pick number one, it is going to be Trevor Lawrence. We figured this all along, basically, ever since we knew that they were getting the number one pick. There was some concern about those Ohio State ties, but I think ultimately Urban Meyer throughout the season has spoke very highly of Trevor Lawrence as a prospect, as a player, as a leader. I think he will be one to Jacksonville.
Definitely. And with you being a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, how excited are you to potentially Trevor Lawrence, what it could look like for your franchise and that remake there in Jacksonville?
I think for Jacksonville, it's going to be great. I think it's more of a culture change, just considering obviously we're getting that true leader at quarterback. But I also think that with the leadership of Urban Meyer, I think that'll kind of change things, the expectations around the locker room. I think one of the biggest things is his message going to convey in an NFL locker room versus a college football locker room? That's ultimately the pivot point for the Jaguars franchise, and I think Trevor Lawrence is a great building block to start.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there on the importance of building that culture there. And that's something the New York Jets here at pick two have really seemed to focus. They brought in Robert Saleh, someone who's really known for building a quality, positive culture. Richard Sherman seems to be really fond of Robert Saleh. Perhaps he'll be a New York Jet this offseason as well at some point. Which direction do you see the New York Jets going at two? I feel like this is one of the hardest picks to actually project at this point.
This is the ultimate pivot point in the NFL draft. This can ultimately change the entire top 10 as a whole, just because it's considering that there's a lot of other QB possible needy teams here. We could look at Atlanta or Detroit or Carolina as all QB needy teams, possibly even Dallas, depending on what they do with Dak. But I also want to reemphasize in this mock draft, this is what I think will happen. I don't think that this is not something I would do. This is something that I think will happen with all of these NFL general managers, just trying to project the actual NFL draft. So for pick two, I believe that the pick will be Justin Fields. I think they will try to leverage a trade with Sam Darnold. We could see Pittsburgh or Indianapolis as potential suitors, and they're looking to maximize his value. They want a first round pick. Ultimately, he has not played like he's worthy of a first round pick to be traded back. There's a lot of reasons why he hasn't panned out in New York. A lot of his supporting cast, his coaching, but ultimately they're going to try to milk out a first round pick for Sam Darnold. Justin Fields would be the pick, barring a trade of Sam Darnold. I think that's ultimately what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, we see Justin Fields now go off the board at two. The top two QBs in the class go 1-2 here. Also, Zach Wilson, a guy who's really vying for that number two quarterback position, possibly. It'll be interesting to kind of see how the pro days go. That could adjust what we see here at pick two as well for the New York Jets. At pick three, we have the Miami Dolphins, an in-division rival there in the AFC East. There's some question marks about what they have on offense for playmakers. Also, that defense could get really scary if they add a top-end guy. Which direction do you see Brian Flores and the Miami Dolphins going at pick three?
I think ultimately they are shooting to protect Tua at this point. Penei Sewell would be the selection here for the Miami Dolphins, just considering they want that franchise tackle. They want to make sure that they protect Tua, and his health is obviously a concern for this franchise, and a lot of their success will hinge on his play ultimately. And so you want to make sure that he is a successful NFL quarterback. The best way of doing that is, keeping him upright and letting him, progress through reads a little longer than he would otherwise. So Penei Sewell would be the selection for the Miami Dolphins here at three, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be about helping Tua Tagovailoa out. I know some people are already jumping off the ship there. I would just urge those that believe that to be a little bit more patient with him. He came in as a backup. We weren't really sure if we were going to even see him at all this year with that hip. Looks like he's recovered pretty nicely. He has some room to progress yet. I wouldn't jump off of that. I think the Miami Dolphins are going to play it safe, grab a tackle to protect him, and continue to move forward with Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback. Now at pick four, we have another team with a QB situation that's a little unsteady, unsure moving forward. Matt Ryan, with Arthur Smith being their new head coach. We're not sure if he's going to be there long term. And really what his future looks like in Atlanta. Does that impact the way they go about making this selection?
Yeah, so this selection is once again another pivot point, because to me, there is no clear and obvious selection for this pick. I think an edge like Kwity Paye makes sense, and we've been mocking that when they were sitting around pick 7 and 8. But at that point, I don't think that's really certainly in play at this point, unless they really, really like Kwity Paye. I don't think the value's there here at 4. But I think they are going to be looking towards the future. Once again, I think one of those possible QB needy teams like Chicago could be calling about Matt Ryan this offseason to get that veteran quarterback presence in the locker room and a guy that has been a proven winner in his career. And I think that ultimately leads to the pick of Zach Wilson. I know a lot of people are going to be like, I don't see that happening, but I think that could be very surprising if Matt Ryan gets moved ultimately this offseason, or they just let Zach Wilson sit for a year, learn under Matt Ryan. I think this is a great pick for Atlanta here at 4.
Yeah, Atlanta needs to find that long-term stability at that QB position. Matt Ryan's not going to be playing forever. Even if they don't move on from Matt Ryan, I think Zach Wilson could really be benefited by sitting for a year as well. Learning from Matt Ryan, obviously a really good guy to learn from with the success he's found in the NFL. I like that for Atlanta. At pick 5, Cincinnati Bengals, they figured out their quarterback situation last year, first overall grabbing Joe Burrow. Now it's going to be about helping Joe Burrow. Which way do you see them helping Joe Burrow moving forward?
I think for the Cincinnati Bengals, they are going to get Joe Burrow's guy, Jamar Chase. I know a lot of people like DeVonta Smith, but I'm thinking from the Bengals general manager standpoint, we know the chemistry between Burrow and Chase was outstanding in that national championship run. That is ultimately who Joe Burrow is going to want. So I don't always think you should let the player, decide who you take, but I think Jamar Chase is a top 5 talent in this class. And I think he would be the selection here at pick 5 for the Bengals, just considering the track record that they've had together. And ultimately, they want to be on the same page with Joe Burrow.
Yeah, and that's a really big question mark now at this point, too, in the draft is, does Jamar Chase, who opted out of the season, go before DeVonta Smith, who just won the Heisman? That's a really big question moving forward. DeVonta Smith, obviously so dynamic, so great this season. Jamar Chase was just like that last year with LSU. Those two guys are the top 2 receivers in this class, and it'll be interesting to see which one goes first on the actual draft night. Now at Philadelphia, I have a feeling DeVonta Smith is not going to fall far behind Jamar Chase. Is that the direction you're going here?
That is the direction I am going. I don't think DeVonta Smith will fall that far in the draft. I doubt that he leaves the top 10 without being selected. I think the Eagles are looking for a dynamic receiver. Obviously, DeVonta Smith gives you that. Obviously, we'd like to see him put on a little more weight, but I mean, ultimately, you don't have to have a big frame to be successful in the NFL as a receiver. But I think DeVonta Smith is a phenomenal talent. I think Philly is jumping all over this pick at 6.
Yeah, Smith's a legit outside wide receiver, something Philadelphia badly needs. They grabbed Rager last year in the draft, passed on Justin Jefferson. Here they get a legitimate number 1 type receiver in DeVonta Smith at pick 6. I really love this for Philadelphia and their future. At pick 7, we have the Detroit Lions, and they just made headlines yesterday, moving on from longtime quarterback Matthew Stafford, who they spent the number 1 pick on in the past, for another former number 1 overall pick, Jared Goff. Also got 2 first-rounders and a third-round pick in that trade. Wonderful trade, in my opinion, for the Detroit Lions. Really hit that reset button. Is part of that reset button looking at a QB here at 7, or are they going best player available at this point?
At this point, I think they are looking for a quarterback to ultimately develop. And I think an interesting prospect in this situation is Trey Lance. I just think that having Jared Goff does wonders for the Lions, just considering he's a bridge quarterback for them potentially, or they could be looking to flip him later in the offseason for an asset. But at this point, I think Trey Lance would be the selection. He can sit behind Jared Goff for a year and really learn. You don't have to rush Trey Lance in, considering he didn't get to play at all really this year. He only played 1 college football game this entire season. He's going to be a little rusty. You give him a year to learn behind Jared Goff. Trey Lance is the pick.
Yeah, with my history, I tend to not like grabbing QBs this high in the draft if I'm not really searching on them. But I think for the Detroit Lions, this makes a lot of sense. Dan Campbell, their new head coach, had talked about how this is going to be a long-term rebuild. They're going to take their time with this. They have a first-round pick from the Rams now in 2022, an additional one in 2023. They have a huge collection of assets now from the Stafford deal. They have time to take their time in this, be patient, give Trey Lance time to develop. I do really like this for Detroit. They're going to be able to surround him with a lot of weapons moving forward with those other assets. At pick 8, we have another team that was maybe hoping Trey Lance would fall to them in the Carolina Panthers. There's a QB question mark there in Carolina as well, but they could also really use some defense help, especially that cornerback spot and linebacker. With how the board's played out so far, which way would you see Carolina going on draft night?
I think Carolina is going to be looking at that linebacker position. They have not been able to replace Luke Kuechly, and I think Micah Parsons is one of the better overall players in the entire class. I think getting him at 8 is a good value pick for the Panthers. Obviously, I don't think there's a quarterback that's worth taking at this number 8 spot unless they decide to trade back and take a guy like Mac Jones or Kyle Trask. But at this point in the draft, I think Micah Parsons is the pick for them. They want to continue to build off of that defense. That's, ultimately last year they geared towards the draft and they sought out defense that entire draft for the most part. Now they're coming back in the first round of this class and they go Micah Parsons.
Yeah, I definitely love that you're looking at bringing Parsons into the middle of that defense. And while they're really strong up the middle now, spent their first round pick last year on Derek Brown, the D tackle, also grabbed Jeremy Chin in a later round. And now they get Micah Parsons. It looks like those three guys are going to be big staples for Carolina's defense moving forward. At pick number 9, we have the Denver Broncos, another team with a few question marks on that defense. I think that's ultimately where they're really looking here with their first year GM now obviously coming in to replace John Elway. Which way do you kind of see the Broncos going at pick 9?
I think the Denver Broncos will ultimately look at that cornerback position long and hard because this is a team that does need some cornerback play. We're not sure really what's going to happen with AJ Boye this offseason, but I think Patrick Surtain, a really good man-to-man guy here that I think Vic Fangio would be, kind of drooling over here at pick 9. I think that's the direction they would go. It's really based off of preference between Farley and Surtain, but I think Surtain solidified himself as the number 1 corner in this draft. And I think that's the direction that Denver will go.
Yeah, Surtain coming off. You have him as the number 1 corner here in the class, but I feel like you don't have Caleb Farley too far behind him. And we're at another team that is very cornerback needy here with the Dallas Cowboys. They could also look at the offensive side of the football, maybe grab a tackle. There's a few different directions I feel like Dallas would be comfortable going. What do you think they will do when it comes to draft night?
I think Caleb Farley ultimately will be the selection here for the Dallas Cowboys. This has been very, very popular amongst our mock drafts throughout the entire process. We think that they will go corner. I think they want to continue to build off of that Trayvon Diggs pick last year. They come back with Caleb Farley this year. You have your 2 corners of the future. And I think that they will ultimately, possibly look at a safety in the 2nd or 3rd round as well. Obviously, they had some struggles in the secondary this year, and I think they're really going to look to solidify that with this draft.
Yeah, they're going to really want to improve in that area. And I think 8 through 10 here is a real cornerback needy part of the draft. I would be very surprised if Farley or Surtain really fall past 10. And I don't think they would fall much further past that too, with San Francisco sitting at 12. With the New York Giants at 11 here, they could use a little bit of dynamism on that offense, struggled quite a bit there. Also, we have to monitor Leonard Williams' situation with his contract, if he's coming back for the Giants or not. That'll also impact some of their later round draft compensation in their deal with the New York Jets when they acquired Leonard Williams. Which way do you see them going at pick 11 here?
I think at pick 11, they will go Jaylen Waddle. Once again, I think you talked about a lack of dynamism in the offense when Saquon Barkley was not there. I mean, they just don't have that big-time playmaker out wide. Ultimately, I don't think Sterling Shepard or Darius Slayton really give you that dynamic receiver. I think they're solid receivers, but I think that Jaylen Waddle has potential to be a very, very good wide receiver in the league. And I think they would be, pretty interested in selecting him. Obviously, they want to help Daniel Jones out as much as they can. But you had mentioned that edge spot being a possibility. Kwity Paye is also something to monitor with that pick.
Yeah, I really like Waddle coming in too. I think that's something we've mocked pretty consistently for the most part. I think that's what Giants fans are probably, really hoping for as well. Getting an athlete in there, looking at the receiving core right now, Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, Golden Tate this past year, that just doesn't really get it done on a week-to-week basis. They need to improve there. I think Jaylen Waddle has that upside for the New York Giants. At pick 12, now we have the San Francisco 49ers, and we had been looking at QB for them quite a bit, but with 4 QBs already gone in the top 7, I don't know how likely it is that San Francisco looks for a QB here. Could you see them possibly trading down in a real draft scenario here, or where would you have them going at pick 12?
Yeah, so this is very tough considering how the board has fallen. The 2 top corners in the draft have already gone. Most of the quarterbacks that are worthy of being selected are gone at this point. You could argue that Mac Jones could work himself up to this point, but I'm not exactly sure if San Francisco is sold on that. So I think once again, we have to look at their biggest need going into the offseason. J.C. Horn would be the selection here at 12. I think that J.C. Horn's going to have to do a really good job at the combine and his pro day to propel him to this spot. But I think it's very possible considering how desperate San Fran is at that cornerback position. I think in this scenario, they do trade down, collect more assets.
Yeah, I really like that. Earlier in the show, I had mentioned how Richard Sherman's probably going to find his way to the New York Jets from the sounds of it. Jason Brett was a bright spot for them this past year, but I don't know how consistent that will be moving forward. He's had issues with health in the past. I'm hoping for the best for him. I'm expecting him to stay in San Fran, but they really do need another outside corner. JC Horn is that guy for them. I really like that selection here at pick 12. Moving into 13 now, we have the Los Angeles Chargers, and they had a huge bright spot from the draft last year in at that QB position, played really well all year long. And I feel like you and I both feel the same way about this, that they need to find some help for him on that offensive line and protect him moving forward. Is that the direction you want to take the Chargers here at 13 and think that they'll ultimately go with?
Yeah, I think arguably the best pass blocking offensive tackle in the draft is still here, Rashawn Slater. I think that ultimately they do want to help out Justin Herbert on that offensive line, in particular that left tackle spot. Rashawn Slater is going to slot in very nicely at that left tackle position. And the Chargers are going to keep working on that offense. Obviously, they have a lot of playmakers, but they need to get better up front. Rashawn Slater goes a long ways in doing so.
Yeah, I really like Rashawn Slater. I know how high of how high you are on him as a prospect as well. I think the Chargers are going to focus that offensive line, and I really like that fit here now in Los Angeles at pick 13. Another team that's really looking at that offensive line would be the Minnesota Vikings. Some questions about if Ezra Cleveland's going to kick back outside, stay inside. Also, that interior defensive line could be a place to look at edge position for them, put a guy across from Danielle Hunter. Is there a specific direction that you see the Minnesota Vikings going with at pick 14?
I think a lot of Vikings fans anticipate Ezra Cleveland moving out to the left tackle spot to replace Riley Reif long term, but I think that they need to keep Ezra Cleveland inside. You already know how well he plays at that guard spot. Christian Darrisaw should be that pick. Ultimately, you're going to get rid of Riley Reif. And for the Vikings, I think you should just keep Ezra Cleveland where he's been very successful so far in his career. Why try to mess it up by putting him outside? And then, if he has a bad season at tackle, messes with his confidence. I keep him inside. I draft Darrisaw because I think that ultimately Darrisaw is the best offensive lineman at this point for the Vikings. And I'm not certainly sold on the whole idea of Ezra Cleveland kicking out to that tackle spot. I think he can do it, but I would much rather just keep him inside for now.
Yeah, I definitely would want to build off of what my strengths are already. And Ezra Cleveland in at guard is a big strength for the Minnesota Vikings. He was a big part of Dalvin Cook's success this year. Also, Kirk Cousins' success as they progress throughout the season. Christian Darrisaw comes in, protects at that left tackle for Cousins, helps Dalvin Cook in the run game. I like that a lot for Minnesota. At 15, we have the New England Patriots. And quite frankly, it's an interesting situation going on there. Matthew Stafford, who had just been recently traded, did not want to be traded to New England. Perhaps because of the lack of weapons that they have there. They don't really have a lot in place for that offense moving forward. Do they address that now at pick 15?
Yeah, so I think at this position, you would look at a possible quarterback selection, but I don't think that that's the direction they're going to go. I think that they are going to take the best player available at this point. Kyle Pitts has been a very, very popular selection here with the New England Patriots. That will continue for me. I just think that New England really values the tight end position. And obviously, we've seen their success, without the tight end. They've had a lot of issues at that tight end spot the last couple of years. I mean, at this point, I think they will take the best player available.
Yeah, Pitts flies off the board here at 15. And like you had mentioned, I think it's very possible that he could be one of the top playmakers in this class, someone who's going to be a tough cover at the tight end spot, almost functions as a true wide receiver too. He can play out wide, kind of reminds you of a little bit of a younger Jimmy Graham, what we saw in New Orleans with his ability to line up all over the field. I like that a lot for New England. At pick 16, we have the Arizona Cardinals, and now there's a few different situations that they could go with here as well. They could use an edge to replace Chandler Jones long-term. We see Kwity Paye still on the board here. Could also really look at cornerback. They've only got 2 guys under contract for next year. That's a tough situation, and one I think that Arizona is going to have a little bit of difficulty choosing on draft night. Which way do you see them going at this point?
Very interesting that you bring up the cornerback position, because there's a couple of guys that possibly could go at this spot, but I don't know if I'm really comfortable taking any of these players currently. I think Eric Stokes has the best chance to be selected at this spot, but I think they're going to go of the positions that they need, the better player available. I think Kwity Paye would be the selection for them here at 16. I know a lot of Cardinal fans really want a corner with this pick, but I think there's a couple names that we saw on that list that will be there in the second round for them. So I think that would be ultimately where they go in the next round.
Right, definitely. And they could be a team that's aggressive on day 2 second rounder to ensure that they get a certain corner that they like. That is still in the realm of possibility for them. I like Kwity Paye here. You get that edge. That's something that they badly need, and I like bringing him in here to address that position. At pick 17, we have the Las Vegas Raiders, another team that's very edge needy. Could also really look at building up the interior of that defensive line. Their safety situation is, quite frankly, a big issue for them. They've been playing cornerbacks at safety quite a bit. Also, they spent money in free agency on linebackers last year. It doesn't seem like that's really worked out. John Gruden and Mike Mayock have to figure out that defensive side of the football. How are they going to do that here on draft night?
Yeah, I think that the edge spot is a definite possibility here at this position, but I think that they are going to look for a true leader on a defense. Obviously, Mayock likes to take from winning programs. I think Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is a very popular selection here. I think this is ultimately the direction that they'll go. They want a guy in that second level of the defense that can be a true leader. He's a sideline to sideline guy, fills the gaps well when defending against the run. And ultimately, I think this is a very Raiders-like pick.
Yeah, I really like that. You had mentioned Mayock and Gruden's tendency to draft from winning programs. They've done that so many times, grabbing like Cleveland Farrell out of Clemson. They've got a lot of different directions, grabbing guys from Clemson, Alabama, Josh Jacobs, obviously. That's something that they do. Owusu-Koramoah coming from number 4 ranked Notre Dame this year makes a lot of sense at pick 17. Now, at pick 18, we have the Miami Dolphins. You had them grabbing Penei Sewell at pick 3 earlier. Is it going to be about building that offense up even further, grabbing a dynamic playmaker for them here now at pick 18? Or which direction do you really see Miami going?
I think for Miami, there's a couple of ways that they could look. Ultimately, I think this is a position that they could possibly look at during this point in the draft. Also, we could look at a possible wide receiver going off the board here. And I think this could be a little high, but I think Toney is a guy that you could consider at this spot. He's a player that it keeps continuing to rise up the draft board at this point. Looking at the linebacker spot, I think Zaven Collins is definitely in play, a linebacker that I could see Brian Flores clinging on to. They love building up the linebacking core. Obviously, Brian Flores comes from that New England system. I think Zaven Collins would be the selection here. I think it's very possible that they go wide out or running back, but I have a feeling that in the second round, they will kind of address a couple of those positions because I think they're pretty deep at this point. A couple of linebackers here, but overall, in the next couple of rounds, I think you can grab one of these guys at running back here and feel very, very comfortable. But at this point, I think Miami would go Zaven Collins.
Yeah, I think Miami would have a really good draft if they went with this route as well. I think Zaven Collins comes in. He's at the linebacker position, I feel, is a little bit more thin than that wide receiver position, than the running back position this year. Dolphins have pick 35. They also have another second round pick. They have the assets to, move up if they want to get another guy in addition to these two. They'll have the means of getting the guys that they want at those playmaker positions. I think it's really important for them to grab Zaven Collins as well. I like that fit in Miami. Now at pick 19, the Washington football team is here on the clock. I supposedly they were really in on Matthew Stafford as well. Did not get the deal done for him though. Do you think Mac Jones is really in play here, or do you have them going in a different direction?
I think for the Washington football team, I think they're looking at that offensive tackle position as being a true need for them. Samuel Cosmi would be the selection here out of Texas, just considering that they are so needy on that offensive line. And I feel like they will probably try to leverage a trade for a quarterback, just considering what has fallen to them at this point. I think Mac Jones could be in play, but I think it's tough for me to take Mac Jones with the 19th overall pick. And Kyle Trask has really fallen down boards as well. In a lot of people's eyes, it's very likely he's not even a first rounder anymore. I don't know at this point where he's going to fall. He had a phenomenal season, but ultimately I think Samuel Cosmi would be the best selection for them. And I think that's the route they're going to look.
Yeah, they grabbed that tackle there. They'll figure out that QB situation. You had mentioned Matt Ryan a little bit earlier on in the show. I think that would be a possibility maybe if Atlanta does feel like they want to move off of him. Another team that would be interested, you had mentioned, was the Chicago Bears. QB, a big need there for them as well. But just like Washington, they could also really use some offensive line help, maybe in the interior or the exterior of that offensive line, grabbing a tackle. Which way do you see Chicago going here at selection 20?
I think the better players that are still available obviously lie in that tackle spot. I do want to hover over the interior offensive line just to kind of give people an idea, where they're sitting. But I think the bigger need for them is to obviously get a tackle at this pick. I think Alex Leatherwood would be the selection for the Chicago Bears, just considering that they have a big need along that entire offensive line. I think they're another team that, once again, they sit in that weird spot, the draft, where do you draft one with this pick? And I don't see it at this point. I think they will leverage a trade for a quarterback.
Right. I think that is the more likely scenario at this point as well. We see them grab the offensive tackle here, just like how picks 8 through 10 earlier were kind of in that cornerback zone in this draft. I feel like 19 through 21 here are that QB offensive tackle zone. Which way are they going to go? Is there going to be a run on QBs or tackles there at those spots? That'll be something worth monitoring here now with the Colts up. Obviously, you had mentioned Sam Darnold earlier. It could be possible he's a Colt at the end of the day. Maybe Matt Ryan finds his way to Indy as well. That'll be something that I'm really interested in monitoring moving forward. Which way do you see Indy going here at pick 21?
I think Indianapolis is going to kind of follow the same route that these two went here with the tackle selections. Jalen Mayfield would be my pick with the Indianapolis Colts selection, just considering that if we look historically, they love to draft offensive linemen, and they want to continue to ensure that their next quarterback has a lot of success. And a lot of that can be predicated on their offensive line and just being strong at every single spot on the line. And they want to make sure that they continue to provide that for their next quarterback.
Yeah, Chris Ballard has done such a great job. They're building up that offensive line, keeping his QB upright. Big part of how they're so successful on the ground as well. They're running the football. I think Mayfield comes in. I think that is the selection that they will ultimately go with on draft night. Now in the AFC South, another team here, the Tennessee Titans. Obviously, a little bit of a disappointing season for them. Ended a little prematurely, I'm sure they feel. How do they build in this draft to get further next season?
I think it ultimately comes to rushing the quarterback. Joseph Ossai from Texas would be the pick. They do need an edge at this point, and Mike Vrabel is going to he's going to opt to take that edge rusher at this point in the draft. I think they could also look at another wide receiver, possibly for Ryan Tannehill, just considering the whole Corey Davis situation. Is an extension going to get done or not? We do not know. That's going to ultimately decide, I think, where this pick goes, because if they can't get something done with Corey Davis, maybe they look at that wide receiver and opt to take an edge later.
Yeah, I definitely see that as well. That'll be the thing to monitor. So if you guys are not subscribed, we will be covering everything free agency related. So make sure you do hit that subscribe button right now if you haven't already. And at pick 23, we have my New York Jets now here on the board. You grabbed Justin Fields for them earlier. You saw that as the direction that they would go with obviously Lawrence off the board. Now at 23, there's a really big question mark here again. I think that they're another pivot point here because you have to look at maybe building up some playmakers on that offense. But our defense really needs a lot of help as well. Austin, which way do you see the Jets going with 23?
I think the New York Jets are going to take a different route than I had been anticipating. I think that they will actually go with Rashod Bateman at this point. I think they are going to get a playmaker for Justin Fields. And ultimately, I think they're going to be a great combination. Rashod Bateman can really take the top off the defense and give Justin Fields a true deep threat for that offense. I think Joe Douglas is going to put himself in the best position to make sure that his quarterback is successful when he selects Fields. So I think Bateman will be the pick. Another guy in play is Eric Stokes at this point, but it's possible that Eric Stokes takes a little bit of a fall, but it really depends here how you feel about, basically picks 29 through 32, banking on somebody doesn't take a corner there.
Right, definitely, because they do have that pick 34 to fall back on here in the second round. Maybe they address that cornerback position here. I really like grabbing Rashod Bateman. I think he has number one wide receiver potential. We grabbed Denzel Mims last year. We still have Jamison Crowder. You need to put together some weapons for your quarterback, especially if we do go with Justin Fields at pick 2. You need to address that wide receiver position. I really like that here for my New York Jets. Now at pick 24, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers, another team with a really disappointing end to their season. Remember, they started the season so hot. Kind of lost a little bit of that momentum. The whole Juju Smith-Schuster drama, that did not help them moving forward. How do the Steelers take the next step moving forward, assuming Ben Roethlisberger is back?
Under the assumption that he is back, I think they're going to take one of the best players available in Najee Harris. What they were really missing this season was a guy that they could ultimately pound the rock with. Le'Veon Bell, when their offense was at their best, they had Le'Veon Bell, obviously, and Antonio Brown, but they were missing that element of the run game. And James Conner did not provide that like they had originally thought when they were using him to replace Le'Veon Bell. They're getting an absolute bruiser at running back. He is exactly what Pittsburgh football needs.
Yeah, I think Najee's really separated himself as the top back in this class. I'd be very surprised on draft night if he is not the first running back to go off the board here. I really like this in Pittsburgh. Gives them some cap flexibility as well. You have that 5th-year option on a running back on a pretty good deal. Makes you not have to commit to James Conner long term. I think this is a good route for the Pittsburgh Steelers. At pick 25, the Jacksonville Jaguars are now again on the clock. Obviously grabbed Trevor Lawrence at pick 1. Which way do you see them going now with how the board's fallen? They could use some offensive line help. Also, that defense could use some addressing as well.
Yeah, so this is going to be one of the more interesting selections because I do think that they could look at that offensive tackle position, but I think they are going to take a guy with higher upside. It's been rumored that it's going to be a 3-4 defense in Jacksonville. I think that is ultimately what they will be doing. Gregory Rousseau is going to be the pick. You put him alongside of guys like La'Von Chason, Josh Allen, and then you can really ultimately with that next pick kind of decide, all right, what are we going to do at that offensive tackle position at pick 33? But you want to make sure that you get Rousseau before a couple of these playoff teams have an opportunity to get him because he is a high upside prospect and he has fallen so far in this draft. I think they would be pretty excited to get him at 25.
Yeah, I really like Rousseau coming in. He is raw, like you had mentioned, but the Jaguars have those positions, filled out right now to the point where they can, take some time to develop him. He's going to be used as possibly a situational pass rusher early, can really build out as an edge rusher in the NFL. And I think his potential, like you had mentioned, is one of the highest in the class at that position. Now, a team that was maybe looking at that edge position, hoping Rousseau would be there for them, the Cleveland Browns. They could also use a linebacker. Edge, like I just mentioned, is a big need. Which way do you see Cleveland going to, really build off their success they found this year?
I think they will be looking edge at this point. Azeez Ojulari would be the selection for the Cleveland Browns. They need a guy that can be opposite of Myles Garrett, and we've been preaching this through a lot of our mock drafts because ultimately you can't just have one pass rusher because if you do that, Myles Garrett's going to be seeing a ton of double teams the way it is, but you need somebody else that can win a lot of one-on-ones. I think Azeez Ojulari gives you that ability to do so.
Yeah, Ojulari comes in now for Cleveland across from Myles Garrett. It's going to be all about taking the eyes off Myles Garrett, opening up some passing lanes for him to get to the QB. I like that a lot for Cleveland moving forward. At pick 27, we have the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, they have the franchise QB there in Lamar Jackson, probably going to get an extension done this offseason. They need to figure out that edge position. Matthew Judon wants $20 million a year. I don't know with the contract situation if they're going to be able to make that work. Is that where you see them going, or do you have Baltimore looking a different direction?
I think once again, they will be looking at that edge spot, and it really comes down to preference for them. But a guy that's been getting a lot of steam, especially lately, has been Jaelan Phillips. Ultimately, I think Baltimore, like you said, they got to replace that edge presence that Matthew Judon gave. Ultimately, Baltimore loves to build up that defense, especially the front seven in particular. Another player that we're not talking enough about at pick 27 is Pat Freiermuth. I think that's actually very much in play. They historically love drafting tight ends with their first round picks. So I think he's on the table as well.
Yeah, despite Mark Andrews' success, I think that tight end is actually a possibility as well. That's really where Lamar Jackson seems to be more comfortable throwing the football. I think that they're going to try and help him move forward as well. I think tight end is very much in the realm of possibility, but I think Jaelan Phillips is the better selection here as well at pick 27. Now at pick 28, maybe this is where we get into that Mac Jones range. No Drew Brees likely moving forward. No official word on if he is retiring or not, but that is where it sounds like he is trending toward. Or do you see New Orleans trying to build forward with Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill?
I don't think they really believe in either one of those guys. I do think Mac Jones is going to be the pick. I've been kind of teeing this one up. He's been falling, and I think ultimately Mac Jones will be a New Orleans Saint at the end of the day, just considering that we're not exactly sure if Jameis Winston can be that franchise guy or if a contract will get done between the two sides. And ultimately, they have to draft a quarterback considering where they are at with the cap. We have to keep in mind they have absolutely no money next year. No matter what they do, no matter who they cut, they will have pretty much no money regardless. So it's going to be kind of tough for contract negotiation's sake. I think they have to draft a quarterback here at 28.
Yeah, this is really going to be their only route to saving money and maybe, getting that salary cap picture back on track, like you had mentioned. That'll be one of the interesting storylines to watch this offseason is how does New Orleans go about getting back under the salary cap? Right now, they have a disaster ahead of them if they don't get ahead of this now. At pick 29, we have the Green Bay Packers, a team that's been really reluctant historically to grab a wide receiver in the first round for Aaron Rodgers. Does that change this year, or do they continue with that trend?
I think it's very possible that we see them break the trend just considering who is available. So let's look at the wide receiver position and kind of show you what is available here. I think the two best guys ultimately are the two they actually have listed in this rankings: Terrace Marshall Jr., Kadarius Toney. They add different things as receivers. Obviously, Kadarius Toney is a little more dynamic with the ball in his hands, but Terrace Marshall is a true red zone threat for a team. Ultimately, I think they will actually opt to go corner. I think Eric Stokes is a very good possibility. I think Asante Samuel Jr. is a possibility. I think that they will go with Asante Samuel Jr. At this point. They do need to get another corner opposite of Jair Alexander. I think Asante Samuel Jr. will give that for you. And for Green Bay, they very well could come back in the second round and take that wide receiver.
Right, definitely. And Aaron Rodgers has elevated the play of his wide receivers for so long. He's going to continue to do that moving forward. And I think Kevin King really did leave a bad taste in the mouth of every Packers fan and probably management there in Green Bay. I'd be very surprised if they don't go with the cornerback, at least in the first 2 rounds, to really fill in that number 2 cornerback spot across from Jair, like you had mentioned. Now at pick 30, we have the Buffalo Bills. What a great season for them. Josh Allen really emerged as a star quarterback in the NFL. How do they continue to build this thing up to maybe take down the Chiefs at some point?
I think that what they need to do is address that cornerback spot. I think that is the number one need for them at this point. You have to consider Eric Stokes, who's a could be a true man-to-man guy in the NFL. I think he's the best player available for them to take, which is really unfortunate for the Jets at 34 that it fell this way. So this might change the altering of their thinking about their prior first round pick that they had. And I think for the Jets is very unfortunate. But looking at Eric Stokes, I think he really fills in nicely for Buffalo. You have to have a guy that can really man up on whoever the Chiefs receivers are. I don't think they have enough of those cover guys right now, and this goes a long ways in trying to build towards that.
Yeah, pick 23. You had alluded to the possible run on cornerbacks here in the back end of the first round. We see that here with the cornerback needy Green Bay Packers. We see that with the cornerback needy Buffalo Bills. And that's just the sad reality of it for the Jets at 23. Maybe they have to reach a little bit on that cornerback to ensure they get one. That'll be something worth monitoring on draft night as well. At pick 31, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What a great season for them, advancing to the Super Bowl in Tom Brady's first year there. And I think you and I are on the same page about this, that they need to make a move that's going to help them deal with the salary cap moving forward. Stay cheap, continue to put talent around Tom Brady. How do they do that here at pick 31?
So this is really interesting at this point. This is not something we had really considered in any of our prior mocks, but I think there's a possibility that Chris Godwin gets overpaid by somebody, opening the door for a guy like Terrace Marshall Jr. to the Buccaneers. Just considering that if they lose Chris Godwin, do they feel comfortable enough with guys like Tyler Johnson and Scotty Miller to kind of fill in for them? We're not exactly sure at this point how they feel about those two players, getting bigger roles, but I think Terrace Marshall Jr. fits in very nicely for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, we see that wide receiver come in. In other mocks, we have been looking maybe on the defensive line or the offensive line as places where they could save money long term. And wide receiver really is that place. Chris Godwin making just under $1 million this year. He's not expensive at all. He is going to get the bag somewhere, whether that's New York, Jacksonville, possibly Chicago. He's going to get paid somewhere. Terrace Marshall Jr. comes in. He is going to be that cheap wide receiver option for them, helps them manage the salary cap in that way. At pick 32 now, the final pick here of the first round with the Kansas City Chiefs. They've been maybe looking at wide receiver as well. Could use another playmaker there across from Tyreek Hill on the outside. Which direction do you see KC going with how their roster is constructed?
I think Kansas City is looking at that wide receiver position. I mean, they only have two guys under contract at that wide receiver spot, and they can look for somebody that is super dynamic, just like the current two that they would have on their roster. Kadarius Toney, who's an absolute speedster. He's a guy that can do a lot with the ball in his hands. Really fits the Kansas City mantra of what they're looking for in a wide receiver.
Yeah, that's very scary here for the other teams in the NFL. You get another speed athlete there. That fits right into what Andy Reid wants to do. That fits into what Patrick Mahomes gives you as that quarterback. And Kansas City takes another step forward offensively. That is very scary for the NFL. If you guys did enjoy this mock draft, please make sure to smash that like button. Subscribe if you are new. We do one of these every single week. We'll also have a second round mock draft coming out here on the channel, building off of this mock draft later in the week. So please hit that subscribe button. We appreciate you guys so much. We just hit 1,800 subscribers, and we'll catch you guys in the very next video.